Bonjour à tous. Hi,
Good morning.
moderating this press conference. Today, you can attend this press conference on Zoom. After brief remarks on the stage, we'll go on question period, first in the room and then on Zoom. So if you're attending, please use the raise hand function at any moment during this press conference, and I'll hand you the mic after the remarks. So welcome, everyone. This is a press conference on the Flight PS752. We have today several guests and elected officials, MP Garnett Genuis and MP Kevin Vuong. I'll hand you the mic. You can have a brief remarks, and then we'll go to question period.
Well, I want to begin by thanking everyone for joining us this morning for a vitally important issue. It's not only about holding an oppressive and evil regime accountable, it's also about protecting Canadians from harassment and intimidation on our own soil. My name is Kevin Vuong. I have the privilege of serving as a Member of Parliament for Spadina, Fort York, and I'm proud to be helping to host today's press conference so that you can hear from 4 leaders, all of them fighting for justice, democracy, and human rights, both here at home and abroad. You're going to hear from my Conservative colleague, member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, Garnett Genuis, Ardeshir Zarezadeh, Director of the National Centre for Human Rights Canada, and formerly a political prisoner. Avideh Motmâenfar, President of the Council for Iranian Canadians, and my friend Mirzad Zareh. You might remember Mirzad from his 400-kilometer march to Ottawa to meet with the Prime Minister and seek justice for his son and all of the victims of Flight PS752. Now, before I kick it over to Garnett, I want to do a quick level set, just so that we're all working from the same fact base. Today marks 1,250 days since the IRGC murdered 176 people on board Flight PS752. Among the passengers were 55 Canadian citizens, 30 permanent residents, including Mirzad's son, Arad, and one of my friends, Amin. It's been 1,827 days since the House of Commons passed on June 12, 2018 motion sponsored by Garnett, calling on the government to designate the IRGC as a terrorist entity under the Criminal Code of Canada. And just 3 days ago, on Friday, June 9th, the Senate also passed a motion to designate the IRGC as a foreign terrorist organization. Yesterday marked the second rally on Parliament Hill where Iranian Canadians came to Ottawa to demand that the government honor the Prime Minister's promise to Mirzad that the IRGC be designated as a terrorist organization. The US has already done so, and people don't understand why it is that Canada does not. So without further ado, over to you, Garnett.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you to all of you, and especially the family members and community members who are here. 5 years ago, I put forward a motion in Parliament to recognize the IRGC as a terrorist organization. Of course, this was before many of the more recent events that have brought the horrific crimes of this regime to the attention of more Canadians. This was before the downing of Flight PS752. This was before the murder of Mahsa Amini that touched off the women life freedom movement. It was clear at that time, as it is even more clear today, that this organization is responsible for causing and fomenting violence and terror throughout the region and throughout the world, and that Canada must respond proportionately by recognizing the IRGC as a terrorist organization. We need to complete that recognition in order to shut down their operations in Canada. To prevent them from being able to fundraise here, recruit here, continue their efforts to threaten and intimidate Canadians, including family members of victims who are here in Canada and should have the security associated with being on Canadian soil. The government voted in favor of my motion 5 years ago, and they have still not acted. So we are continuing to renew that call to list the IRGC as a terrorist organization. Conservatives have committed that in government we will list the IRGC as a terrorist organization, but we don't want to have to wait for that point. We want to see it get done right away, and so we continue to renew our call on the government to list the IRGC as a terrorist organization, to recognize the violence that they are responsible for, and to stand with victims and their families. So I'm pleased to be here today to reiterate that message. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ardeshir Zarezadeh. I am the Executive Director of the International Center for Human Rights, an organization promoting human rights for Middle East, especially working on Iran issues. I'm a former political prisoner in Iran, detained by IRGC and Iran's intelligence service several times. I spent 2 years in solitary confinement. The reason I'm here is not just because I was tortured by IRGC. I'm here because IRGC is killing Iranians on the inside of the country and terroring people on the outside. They are supporting terrorist groups, especially Hezbollah, Hamas, and you know those organizations are already listed as terrorist entities in Canada. So we are asking Canadian government, we address all politicians to work on this issue. It's very serious. We are working on this because IRGC is threatening Canadian peace and security. IRGC is targeting Iranian Canadians in Canada's soil. And we urge the government to designate IRGC as soon as possible. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Avideh Motmâenfar. I'm the president of the Council of Iranian Canadians. As we know, foreign interference is the talk of Canada, and Canadians are rightly concerned about the state of our democratic institutions. Among the most concerned are Iranian Canadians, because years before China entered the news cycle, we began to raise the alarm about the Iranian regime's attempts to influence Canadian institutions. Although the attention squarely is on China now, we reiterate our call that foreign interference must be taken seriously. The struggle is nothing new. Today is the 5-year anniversary of the House of Commons motion that demanded the federal government to list IRGC and deter malign activity of the Iranian regime in Canada. 5 years later, this has yet to happen. Today, the Iranian regime, one of the foremost exporters of terror and violence, instability and repression, continues to operate in Canada. And apart from its sanctioned top leadership, much of the IRGC is free to operate in Canada without consequences. Foreign interference can have little consequences. Before 1992, the IRGC shamelessly assassinated Iranian dissidents and critics abroad. But since 1992, because they got caught and trialed at the Mykonos trial and condemned for their interference and terrorist activities in Berlin, they changed their strategies, and the regime's new strategy focused on dispatching its sympathizers and supporters to foreign countries, including Canada, where these individuals established themselves in cultural, political, academia, and commercial sectors of society, and work covertly to change public perception about the Islamic Republic. To this day, whether in academic, business, or political spheres, Tehran loyalists are attempting to influence engagement with the Iranian regime. And although they are a small part of the Iranian population abroad, but they are linked to IRGC and related institutions, and they push their agenda forward. Designating the IRGC as a terrorist entity is going to jeopardize their agenda to operate in Canada. Iranian Canadians, more than any other community, want to see IRGC recognized as a terrorist group. And because they fled oppressive regime and came to Canada for its freedom and stability and the strength of its institutions. So today, Canada is under threat. And without robust action on behalf of the government, Canada risks becoming the playground of the hostile foreign powers. This isn't a question of Canadian values anymore. It is a matter of our sovereignty. Thank you for this opportunity.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Merzad Zarei. I am father of Arad Zarei, 18 years boy, been killed by IRGC on January 8, 2020. I am here to ask in the government what more evidence our government need to list in the IRGC on the list of the terrorist group in Canada. Are we waiting for more killing from the IRGC than we listing the IRGCs on the list of the terror? I walked almost 450 kilometers from my Arad's home to the front of the parliament here to meet the Prime Minister. When I had the meeting with the Prime Minister, he promised me to list in the IRGC as a terrorist group in Canada. Now, I'm here and asking the Prime Minister, when Mr. Prime Minister will deliver his promise. Thank you.
Merci. Thank you. We'll now go to the question period. I don't see questions in the room, and there is no attendees online to ask questions by now. So if you're attending online, please use the raise hand function at this moment to ask a question. But as a moderator, I'll take this opportunity to ask a question. Boris Prou, Le Devoir. My question is to you, Mr. Vuong, and to you, Mr. Genuis. Right now, there's perhaps talks between the government and opposition leaders for a public inquiry on foreign interference. Do you think that inquiry should be broader than the Chinese interference to include also Iranian interference and other countries as such?
Well, I think there was a motion that the House of Commons adopted precisely on this subject. So it's it's nothing new to say that those discussions should be guided by by the will of the House of Commons. Clearly, we know that the situation in Iran is a huge problem in terms of foreign interference, and this is something we've been calling for action on for a long time.
I agree with Garnett. I think one of the things that we hope that this government will do is actually honor the will of Parliament. Both 5 years ago today, today marks the 5-year anniversary of when majority of parliamentarians passed a motion sponsored by Mr. Genuis calling on the government to designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization. Similarly, there have been motions calling for an independent, nonpartisan public inquiry. And so I think it's immensely vital that the government actually follows through on the will of Parliament.
But as a follow-up, do you think the foreign interference that Iran is perhaps doing in Canada is as concerning as Chinese interference that we had media stories about? Do you think this can be comparable?
I mean, I don't want to get into weighing these things out. I think in part because there are very different kinds of foreign interference, and there are some different ways that different states act. I think it'd be a bit foolish for me to start getting into saying, well, this is worse, and but what I want to just bring us back to is the testimony that we've heard today, and I've been part of previous press conferences where, for instance, there was another family member of a victim of the downing of Flight PS752 who spoke specifically about threats that he had personally received from the IRGC. So, regardless of weighing against anything else, the reality of family members of victims who were trying to speak out for justice receiving threats themselves here in Canada. That's pretty horrific. It underlines the need for action on foreign interference and also for the listing of the IRGC as a terrorist organization.
I think there are a lot of parallels between what we've seen between the Chinese Communist Party and their agents, as well as that of the IRGC in terms of intimidating and harassing Canadians on our own soil. I think it's pivotal that this government actually, stops being a doormat and actually stands up to defend the rights and freedoms of our people. And actually, yesterday, we had individuals from the IRGC that came to the rally in an attempt to be able to intimidate and harass people that were demonstrating and trying to seek justice. And I think this is a good opportunity. If I may, Mirzad, you and I were discussing this just prior to this. If you can just share how that made you feel that a member of the IRGC was here yesterday.
Yes, what I feel is what country we make to the member of the IRGC to be so free and using the freedom of the country we have here to come in and threaten other people. Even member of the parliament, they have no safety here on capital city of the countries, on the front of the parliament. They are so free and so, I call them strong, and I call our countries, I'm sorry to use this word, is naive, to not standing for the people, to not standing for the victim families, to member of the IRGCs coming on the front of the parliament and making such a threat to the member of the parliament and the victim families and the people they are gathering here against the IRGCs. This is, I have to say, we need to stand up. We have to show them that our country is not naive. We have to stand strong. Thank you.
Well, the IRGC members called so many Iranian Canadians in the past few months after the huge demonstrations took place in Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Vancouver. They kept sending text messages to students that warning them not to participate in rallies and demonstrations. And we reported all of these to the federal police. I received the threats myself. I got phone calls, messages. And looks like the RCMP and the government are not taking these threats serious. Even the families of PS752 received threats. And it's just, investigation. The government says we are watching, we are careful. But as Mirzad mentioned, there were IRGC members in Canada's capital on Parliament Hill threatening us directly in person. And this is unbelievable why our government let these people come to this country and threaten the civil rights activists, human rights activists, students, victims of families. The Anti-Terrorism Act amended criminal code to create a list of terror groups, and since 2008 we only have 77 entities listed, including Quds Force, a branch of IRGC. Just 1 year ago, Ontario Court of Justice found IRGC a terrorist entity under Canadian law. So what else our government wants to see, especially Prime Minister, Public Safety Minister, to understand IRGC, there is a legal base to list IRGC, aside from the evidence, the killing and murdering people.
I remember one thing to say. As Mr. Prime Minister, his promise, he said, we making these countries not behaving for the terrorism. I would say now, thank you. You made your promise, and here is not their heaven for them. But on the front of the parliament is a heaven for them. Thank you.
What you've heard is directly from members of the Iranian diaspora, that they've been harassed, they've been intimidated, they've been threatened. And the question that keeps coming up is, what does it take for this government to actually stand up and do something? Does someone need to be killed until they are finally going to wake up to the need to act? Just north of Toronto in the GTA, during a protest where, again, people were standing up, trying to seek justice, demanding justice. There was a case of somebody driving a vehicle that was caught on camera towards one of the protesters. What does it take for this government to act? And I think what's clear today, and what's clear if you've gone to any of the rallies, whether it's been on Parliament Hill, twice now, Toronto City Hall, Richmond Hill, Queen's Park, it's clear that the Iranian Canadian community is demanding not just justice, but action to keep them safe and to hold the oppressive regime accountable for their crimes.
Merci. Thank you. I see no questions at this time, so that puts an end to this press conference. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.